with sorrowful hearts, announce passing indefatigable, fearless defender faith, deeply loved hand of the cause, Zikrullah Khadem. His sterling services to the cause, his total consecration to tasks assigned to him by the beloved guardian, his outstanding efforts as member of the National Spiritual Assembly, Cradle Faith, his valuable soul-uplifting stimulation imparted body believers North America, particularly United States Baha'i community, his untiring endeavors through his talks and writings in safeguarding covenant and in instilling appreciation, love for Shoghi Effendi, shed undying luster over period of his admirable stewardship, cause of God. Offering prayers, holy shrines, progress his radiant soul, Abha kingdom. Urge hold befitting memorial gatherings his name at all houses of worship, as well as in all local Baha'i communities. But who was this man? Where did he come from? And how did he achieve such a station? He often referred to his own upbringing in Tehran in the district called Sar-e Agha, where the early Baha'is used to live. The Baha'i enclave was in an area called Hayat-e-Bagh, where rows of houses on both sides of the street led to a large garden. He recalled seeing famous teachers like the brothers Nayer and Sina and the poet Naim. Were it not for his beloved's bounties and blessings, how would a person ever hope to witness the glories of the faith in the West, coming from this turn-of-the-century-old country? All these blessings are his.
In hame avazha az shah بود,
as he used to recite. Zikrullah Khadem was born in 1904, the eldest son of Nasrullah and Razieh, having an older sister, Maliheh, and 4 brothers, the twins Izzatullah and Enayatullah, of whom Izzatullah survived, Adel and Aref. His father served Abdul-Baha in the Holy Land for 4 years as a personal attendant and was given the title Khadem for his servitude. He accompanied Abdul-Baha on a retreat to the cave of Elijah. There, Abdul-Baha taught him to cook the basic Persian dish of ob-gusht. In a tablet to him received on his return to Persia, Abdul-Baha praised him for his services, saying, "Though outwardly in a position of servitude, in reality you are a master." Abdul-Baha also bestowed honor upon the mother of Zikrullah, in a tablet referring to her as Razieh Marzieh, or she who is accepted by her Lord and with whom God is well pleased. Mr. Khadem's paternal mother, called Bibi Jan, was a brave woman. Whilst grief-stricken following the martyrdom of Baha'is, she would recover the bodies with the assistance of other staunch Baha'i women for a dignified burial. Abdul-Baha praised her courage in this tablet addressed specifically to her and to the daughter of Mullah Ahmad as the 2 handmaidens of God. Raised in an atmosphere where the faith was at the center of their family's life, and moved by his father's service to the master and his grandmother's courage, Zikrullah's ardent wish was to render that same spirit of devotion after Abdul-Baha's passing to the newly appointed guardian of the Baha'i faith. He wrote a letter to Shoghi Effendi in 1925, pledging his total loyalty and absolute servitude to him. The beloved guardian asked his secretary to respond and added in his own handwriting the following: "My spiritual friend, rest assured in the divine confirmations. This servant from the depths of his heart wishes for the ever-increased confirmation of thyself from his blessed threshold, and I am hopeful that you may be assisted and confirmed to render great services in the future. You are not and never shall be forgotten. The impact of this first communication from the center of the faith to a young man of only 21 was to captivate his entire being and galvanize him into action. He approached Haji Amin, the trustee of Zikrullah, to make a petition to the Guardian to grant him the honor of pilgrimage.
And he was instrumental for my pilgrimage. He wrote a letter to the Guardian and said, mentioned my name, Khadem is coming to Baghdad and is beseeching to come for pilgrimage. If you permit him, it's all right. If not, so much the better. I said, Haji, take this word out. He said, no. Anything that the Guardian decides, that is right for you.
Though unhappy, he remained resolute, and, impatient for a response, he obtained his passport and set off from Tehran to Baghdad to be that much closer to Haifa. Upon arrival there, the Central Spiritual Assembly of Iraq, seeing this young man's state, eventually told him to go to Haifa without awaiting his permission, accepting responsibility for any reprimand. He set off by bus for Haifa and was dropped unceremoniously in front of the master's house. What made a huge impression on him was the sight of the plaque at the entrance with the master's name, Abdul Baha Abbas, engraved on it, surrounded by flowers. John Esselmont, the British Baha'i and author of the famous book Baha'u'llah and the New Era, who had recently moved to Haifa at the behest of Shoghi Effendi, saw him from his vantage point at the window of the Western Pilgrim House in a prostrated position, hesitant to enter. Esselmont rushed over, embraced him and took him in. Filled with trepidation of this unauthorized visit and the imminent encounter with Shoghi Effendi, he was greeted at the entrance by Mirza Hadi, the father of Shoghi Effendi, who gave him the good news that this very day his permission had been sent by post to Baghdad. He became so elated that he could not contain himself.
And what happened with me, my first pilgrimage in the presence of the beloved Shoghi Effendi, when he entered the room, and believe me, I could not control myself. I don't know what happened to me. And you know, kissing the hands and the knees of the Baha'u'llah forbade it in the Aqdas. But some of the friends were so moved they could not control themselves, including myself. The Guardian said, Baha'u'llah has forbidden. It happened with Abdul Baha. Some of the friends went to kiss the hands of Abdul Baha. Abdul Baha said, Baha'u'llah has forbidden. He said, I know, but not these hands. The moment I wanted to kiss his hands, something within my heart, I cried, I said, my beloved, by God, it's impossible. And when I said by God, he let me, and I kissed his hands. I could not grasp everything that the Guardian said. He spoke with such power, and the interpretation of the Tablet of Carmel was so significant. The Tablet of Carmel is the framework of the world order of Baha'u'llah. The beloved Shoghi Effendi said, the Ark of God in this tablet is the universal house of justice. سوف تجري سفينة الله عليك. Ere long, the Ark of God will sail on thee, O Mount Carmel. And then he waved his hand. He said, it means the laws of God will flow from thee, O Mount Carmel, to the whole world.
As a child, Zikrullah attended the Tarbiyat school, run by the Baha'is, and later he taught at that same school. His higher education was at the Darul Funun College in Tehran. He later went to the south of Iran to serve as an interpreter and language tutor for the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. He also started his own language school and became personal assistant to the British general manager of the company. Later, he left that post for Tehran to become secretary of the Iraqi embassy in Iran. He was to render great services during this period, including the transferal of Baha'i relics to the Holy Land, including the sword of Mullah Hussein. He was also instrumental in opening the doors of pilgrimage to Persian Baha'is. This photo was commissioned by The Guardian on the occasion of the return of the first group of Persian pilgrims in May of 1938. On the occasion of the transferal of the remains of the mother of Abdul-Baha and his brother, the Purist Branch, from Akka to Mount Carmel, their monuments seen here in their present glory, The Guardian bade Mr. Khadem chant 2 prayers in the holy shrines. 70 years earlier, the Purist Branch had given up his life as a ransom in the most great prison in Akka for those who were prevented from attaining the presence of his father.
He bade me to say 2 prayers in the shrine of the Bab and the shrine of Abdul-Baha. And when I came back, he called me. I ran and I hastened to reach him. And when I arrived, he said, these 2 prayers were answered. One was for the restriction of the Baha'is of Iran, that will be lessened. And the second one was for the door of pilgrimage to be opened, the way that it was in the time of Baha'u'llah, after 70 years. And then the beloved Shoghi Effendi turned to me, he said, you do your best. The friends come by groups. They must say that they go to visit the holy shrines of Akka and Haifa. I was burst into tears. How could such a thing happen? How was it possible? I bowed and the Guardian said, you go ahead and I pray. And he did it, he prayed. And so many pilgrims, group by group, started to go with the same, under the same text, going to the holy shrines of Baha'is in Akka and Haifa. They went as many that the beloved Shoghi Effendi sent me a cable. He said, now it's enough. This I simply tell you as an example. Anything that the Bab, Baha'u'llah, Abdul-Baha, and the Guardian, they wanted to be done, nobody in the world could stop it.
In 1933, Mr. Khadem sought the hand in marriage of Javidokhte Javid. Raised in a prominent family, she attended the Tarbiyat school for girls. This picture was taken when she was completing her high school studies and working part-time in a bank. Mr. Khadem first saw her there.
I was very young. I was going to school, and at the same time, to be a very modern girl, I was going also to the bank and working 2-3 hours in the bank. And of course, the way was at that time in Iran, my father had to come back of me, of course, with the distance, to see whether I go to the bank and come and pick me up like that. I always said, but don't show that you're with me, because it seems that I'm immature. I said, well, nobody sees me. I'm going behind you.
As customary, an approach was made via her father, Hossein Javid, a prominent Baha'i, for the hand of Javidokht. For the visit to Mr. Javid's to receive the bride's approval, Mr. Khadem requested Keith Ransom Kaler, an American Baha'i who had been sent by Shoghi Effendi to Iran to help remove the ban on Baha'i literature, to accompany him. Sadly, she passed away a short while later in Esfahan, was highly praised by The Guardian, and elevated posthumously to the rank of Hand of the Cause of God.
Because when my father told me that there is a young man who wants to marry you, I started crying and crying and crying. I said, no, it's not the time. I want to finish my study, I want to do this and I want to do that. My father said, oh, okay, if you don't want it, don't want it. The Baha'i faith is not something that they are obligated to marry. but don't you want to see him? I said, no, not really. Said, anyway, he's coming tonight. And he came. I was in the back of the window of the room, and I saw him coming through the yard. I looked at him. My heart filled with so much love for him. I said, if my father said, right now marry him, I would. But how can I tell him? All my tears dried up. I was crying up to that time. And then my father came to the other room and said, did you see him? I said, yes. He said, why don't you cry anymore? I said, well, I have to be obedient. He said, no, this is not obedience. You love him. I loved him. Do you know how long did it take us? Only 10 days. I married him. And I loved him. Still I love him. But I know that we are always together. I know that.
Theirs was a story of love at first sight, as Mr. Khadem also admitted to his wife. Here, below her wedding photo, Mr. Khadem inscribed, "Souvenir of an eternal bond," dated 3rd October 1933, and signed Zikrullah and Javidocht.
The very first night we were married, he told me, I want only one thing from you, nothing else. I don't want you to be a cook because I have one. You know, mysteriously, he was very, very prosperous in business. He said, I don't want any cook. I don't want any housekeeper. I don't want any of those things. I want you to have one thing. Can you love God the way I do? Say, can you love the beloved guardian the way that I love? I said, I try. Because I still, to this day, I couldn't achieve it.
She learned that the guardian was everything to him, even dearer than his own life. This utter devotion to the guardian of the faith was to bind them closely in a relationship that would deepen with the passing years. Despite their utter devotion to the center of the faith, theirs was also a modern and liberal marriage, devoid of dogma and tradition. Mrs. Khadem pursued her interests and studies and earned her bachelor's degree at the University of Tehran, which she achieved when her children were more grown up. She also pursued coursework for a master's degree. For a while, she was to serve on the National Women's Committee, called Progress of Women, or Taraghi-e-Neswan, which was at the vanguard of women's rights in Iran in the 1930s. Here she is pictured with the members of the Young Baha'i Committee of Tehran. On weekends, they went on outings together and journeyed by car to visit Baha'i centers throughout the country, thus bringing the message of the guardian to the friends in remote areas.
And so Thursday night, after coming from embassy, because we're working at the embassy, and up to 1 o'clock only, no more. Go late, come early. I said, my life is not for work, it's for selling the cars.
This required setting out just as the weekend began, on Thursday afternoon, to reach their destination on Friday, and then drive back all Friday night so as to start work on Saturday morning, dazed but feeling radiant and fulfilled.
My job was to tell stories. He said, tell me stories, tell me everything that I don't sleep.
Mr. Salim Nunu, a newly declared Iraqi Baha'i of Jewish descent, became a very close friend of Mr. Khadem and the family, and often accompanied them on these visits. For the rest of their lives, they were to remain close personal friends, in total dedication to service to their beloved guardian. Their marriage produced 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls. In order of age, Mujan, Jena, Riaz, Ramin and May, 3 of whom are in this early photo. Their married life, though exciting, had its moments of difficulty.
As a husband and wife, we never ever quarreled in such way that remained the whole day. Never at night we went to bed being angry with each other. Never. Then one thing happened. Before the time the night was over, everything was solved. Because it's impossible, you don't have to live with someone and having a problem.
This photo, taken on Nowruz of 1951, was shown to The Guardian by hand of the cause Amelia Collins. The Guardian asked for a copy, which he then retained. Mrs. Khadem accompanied Mr. Khadem on his many international travels. During these periods, their respective mothers and a sister took turns to look after the children. Here they are with their grandmothers. Mrs. Javed, the mother of Mrs. Khadem, was a fun-loving grandmother who did what grandparents are meant to do. The mother of Mr. Khadem and Malihe Khonum, Mr. Khadem's sister, took care of the children and occasionally spoiled them with outings and special treats. Shiraz, Persia. In the mid-19th century, this ancient city was the setting for a dramatic event. A young man was led down this narrow, winding path to the front door of this house. His companion knocked, and they were shown in. Beyond the courtyard, he was led up the stairs and finally into this room. It was here that he conversed with his host, the Bab, meaning gate, who declared that he had come to prepare the way for the promised one of all ages. In the early evening hours of the 22nd of May, 1844, Mullah Hussein of Bushrui became the first to believe in him. 100 years later, Shoghi Effendi, himself a descendant of the Bab, asked the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Iran to prepare a befitting commemoration of that historic event. A select crowd composed of members of the National Assembly and 91 convention delegates came together in Shiraz, paid their homage at the house of the Bab in that upper chamber, adorned by a precious silk carpet spread out by the trustee of Zikrullah, Mr. Waliullah Varga, as a gift from Shoghi Effendi. Mr. Khadem, whose honor it was to act as the Guardian's intermediary in Iran for all correspondence with the institutions and believers, a role he carried out proudly as his mailman, as he referred to it, was instructed to carry the message of Shoghi Effendi to that assembly.
On May 9, I received a cable from the beloved Shoghi Effendi, in which he says an important communication was sent through Baghdad, and he mentioned the name of the man who was intermediate. And he bade me he said, do your best to reach Shiraz.
With the Second World War raging, disrupting communication links in the Middle East, and with the further limitations of time, Mr. Khadem arranged for the centenary tablet to be transported by plane by a Baha'i pilot to Tehran and to then set off by car with a friend and 4 sets of spare tires several hundred miles to Shiraz. Miraculously, they managed to arrive minutes prior to the appointed hour of 2 hours and 11 minutes after sunset, gave the tablet to Mr. Ali Akbar Furutan, the Secretary of the National Assembly of the Baha'is of Iran, who then chanted their beloved's majestic and auspicious message.
قصره المشید و نظمه البدیع.
In February 1952, Mr. Khadem was among the second contingent of the Hands of the Cause of God to be appointed by Shoghi Effendi. On a sunny Friday morning, being a weekend, he was with his children at home, a cable arrived that was to transform his life.
I said, what is the matter? What is this cablegram? He said, nothing. I said, nothing? You're crying. And gave me the cablegram that I read. It was the elevation of Mr. Khadem to the station of Hand of the Cause of God. I said, marvelous, marvelous, congratulations. I am not Hand of the Cause. Do you know what the station of Hand of the Cause is? Well, I couldn't argue with him. He said, promise me, don't talk to anyone about this.
His mother was the first to hear of this honor and instantly recalled the tablet from Abdul Baha to her mother-in-law, in which he predicted that the bright light of his grace will enkindle the lamp of that family. He and Mr. Shua'ullah Aloi were to join 3 other Hands of the Cause, elevated only 3 months earlier by the Guardian to the rank of Hand of the Cause amongst the first contingent. Mr. Valiullah Vargha, Mr. Tarazullah Samandari, Mr. Ali Akbar Furutan, with Mr. Khadem and Mr. Aloi, now comprised the 5 Hands of the Cause of God residing in Persia. Together with Mr. Vargha, Mr. Furutan and Mr. Aloi, he also served for many years on the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Iran. After his elevation to the rank of Hand of the Cause, he made a pilgrimage in 1952 to the Holy Land, with his wife, eldest son Mujan, and Mr. Jalal Khazeh, who later was also to be elevated to the rank of Hand of the Cause of God. There, he delivered to Shoghi Effendi the original manuscript of Baha'u'llah's Kitab-i-Iran, the Book of Certitude, which was handwritten by Abdul Baha with margin corrections by Baha'u'llah himself. This book was in the safekeeping of Hand of the Cause Mr. Valiullah Vargha, having been retrieved by the Hand of the Cause Tarazullah Samandari from Fatime Khonum, a member of the family of the Bab.
Would it be nice if I could take the original book of Iran to the beloved Shoghi Effendi? The original book of Iran, such a wonderful book, such a wonderful book. I remember one of the old believers, Abdul Rasul, he told me that once he was walking around the mansion of Baji and Baha'u'llah was sitting on a couch and had a book in his hands. He said, Abdul Rasul, do you know what book I'm reading? Abdul Rasul bowed. Baha'u'llah said, it's the book of Iran. It's a wonderful book that Baha'u'llah admired and studied himself. I came to know that the beloved Shoghi Effendi had already sent his instructions to the National Assembly of the Baha'is of Iran that no relics, no writings, nothing should be taken to the Holy Land. The condition, the situation did not permit. So that was my heart's desire. I went to Mr. Furutan, the Hand of the Cause, who was the then Secretary of the National Assembly, and I told him. Oh, he laughed. He said, this is a good desire, but as we say in Persian, we shouldn't blame the young people for their desires which shall never come to pass. But I tell you, friends, Baha'u'llah tells us that when you pray from the bottom of your heart, God answers. Without saying to the beloved Shoghi Effendi, I don't know how, he heard it in the Holy Land. Next day, a direct cable came from the beloved Shoghi Effendi, in which he said the original book of Iran to be brought to him. And I rushed to the house of Mr. Baha'i. He was not there, but we knew it was in the safe. There was no key. We broke the safe and had the book of Iman with me. When the beloved Shoghi Effendi received us that day, and we were just in heaven, in his presence. When he rose, that we knew that we had to leave. I took the book from my pocket and just presented to him with great reverence. He said, "Is this that precious book? این است آن کتاب نفیس." I bowed. The beloved Shoghi Effendi took the book that very night to the pilgrim's house where the Western pilgrims used to have supper with him. And it happened, dear hand of the cause, Hugo Jekeri, he has written this in his book. He shared with the friends that that night the Guardian took that book to them and said that was most glorious gift from Persia.
It was during this pilgrimage that Shoghi Effendi prepared Mr. Khadem for his duties and travels as an itinerant hand, which he was to undertake on behalf of the beloved Guardian.
The day that the Guardian said to me that you will visit all these places, my wife went to him, the women would go separately, and when she was in the presence of the Guardian, the beloved Shoghi Effendi said to her that in future, in the company of your husband, you'll go to all these places in the world. Anytime she was complaining, said, "No, you will live long. The Guardian has said it."
He travelled first through Europe, infusing the Baha'i friends with his special devotion for the beloved Guardian. He had an opportunity to also meet other newly appointed European hands of the cause, such as Dr. Hermann Grossmann, Dr. Ugo Giaccheri, and Dr. Adalbert Mühlschlegel. On completion of his tour, the beloved Guardian expressed his gratitude in a letter conveyed by his secretary. Shoghi Effendi is very happy with his wonderful services in so many centres in Europe and hopes his African trip will be as great a benefit to the cause. Assure him and his family of prayers. The African tour, which began in 1953, was more extensive, covering the whole continent from Tunisia in the north to South Africa and from Kenya in the east to Liberia in the west. On some of these trips, he was accompanied by Hand of the Cause Mr. Musa Banoni and his wife, and also by Hand of the Cause Mr. Valiula Vargo and his wife. They are remembered in heartwarming detail in a book written by Mrs. Khadem entitled Zikrullah Khadem, with love. Time does not allow the recounting of the many adventures that are described there, such as when Mr. Musa Banoni and Mr. Khadem went off to see Baha'is in remote regions on a single-engine plane, not to return, and were feared dead by their wives, who grieved over their presumed loss, only to find them arriving back looking tired but blissful. The African tour coincided with the first of the intercontinental conferences arranged by Shoghi Effendi in the holy year of 1953, commemorating the 100th anniversary of Baha'u'llah's confinement in the Sior-Chal of Tehran, the birthplace of his mission, and the launch of the Guardian's 10-year spiritual crusade. Images from the Kampala conference, at which many hands of the cause participated, reflect the joy and enthusiasm of that gathering. This conference was to be followed by the intercontinental conferences of Chicago, USA, Stockholm, Sweden, and that of New Delhi, India. These gatherings infused the friends throughout 4 continents with a renewed love and devotion for the Guardian of the Faith. They also captivated the hearts of so many and moved them to set off to fill pioneering goals of the 10-year plan. Like many other hands of the cause, Mr. Khadem attended all 4 conferences.
you will be chanting and participating at the dedication. Nobody knew what time the dedication would take place. I questioned the National Spiritual Assembly. I said, do you know what time it will be dedicated? They didn't know. You will be chanting. This was 1939. Years passed until 1952, my last pilgrimage. The beloved Shoghi Effendi, after walking with us, there were some chairs put on a corner of the gardens. He bade us to sit. We sat with him in the gardens, and then he turned to me. He said, do you know the commentary of the Surah of Joseph from memory? I was so ashamed. I said, my beloved, I know, but not in order. He said, all right. And he took from his pocket an envelope larger than this, containing perhaps 16, 17 pages, and handed over to me and bade me to chant. I started to chant, but you know how I could chant. Coughing and crying in the presence of the guardian to chant. But he could hear it correctly. One of the friends said he was reminded that that was not correct. He said, don't worry, Baha'u'llah listens correctly. He hears correctly. When it reached to the last page, before I opened my lips to say it, it seems that he was so excited because it predicts his martyrdom. The beloved Shoghi Effendi said, enough. So that was not chanted. And I put inside the envelope, and I was so happy. I said, well, all the things that the guardian said to me tonight, this is for me, it impressed me very much. The moment I put this, and I tried to put it in my pocket, the beloved Shoghi Effendi stretched his hands to take it back. And that broke my heart. I had no choice. I got up on my knees, and with great reverence, I offered to him. But in my heart, I said, my beloved, this was not fair. Ya Baha'u'llah. The moment I thought that in my heart, this was not fair, he heard it. He didn't tell me anything. And then we came to United States, where the dedication of the house of worship would take place. The National Spiritual Assembly of United States assigned a hotel for every hand where to stay. And they had put my mail on the table. They greeted me, welcomed me, and they said they had prepared the schedule and the program of the dedication of the house of worship, and had sent it to the beloved Shoghi Effendi for approval. He has sent back with a note that Khadem at the dedication of the house of worship should chant from the commentary of the Surah of Joseph, and this is what he has to chant.
The very same handwritten copy of the tablet that he had read aloud in his presence.
Alhamdulillah الذي أنزل الكتاب على عبده بالحق ليكون للعالمين سراجا وهاجا. أو أهل الأرض من أتى ذكر الله وكتابه هذا فقد أتى الله.
In total, over the period from 1952 to 1957, he visited well over 100 countries and dependencies across the world and met Baha'i friends in hundreds of centers. His passport, which he called his little suitcase, grew in size to a small book over 3 inches thick after the inclusion of all the additional pages required for visas to visit these countries, some of them visited repeatedly. This little suitcase was later sent to the Holy Land for safekeeping. Having just returned from a tour of North and South America in 1957, Mr. Khadem continued with visits to Middle Eastern and European centres in the fall of that year. One night, he had a disturbing dream. He dreamt that the greatest name fell to the floor and that he was attending a great funeral. When he awoke, he became distraught and ill, guessing whose funeral this might be. Alas, he was informed that it was his beloved guardian who had passed away in London. The blow was unbearable. He could not bear to think of a world without his Lord, his object of adoration. He became paralyzed with grief and seriously ill. Mr. Hadi Rahmani, a long-time friend and colleague on the National Spiritual Assembly of Iran, who was in London, recounted that he had to be force-fed so as to be able to attend his beloved's funeral in London.
I remember the first session when the hands gathered after they visited the shrine of Baha'u'llah and came to a gathering. And there was a seat put at the head of this table in the mansion of Baha'u'llah. And that seat was vacant in honor of the beloved Shawq Effendi, so that we could feel his presence. Everybody was in tears. One of the hands, after a while, addressed and said, let us do something. So much tears, it blinds our eyes. Let us find our ways. And the room of Baha'u'llah at the corner in the mansion of Baha'i, we had that room. Anything, any decision was made not by majority, unanimous. And if there was difference of ideas, we simply hastened to go to the room of Baha'u'llah and prayed and prayed. And when we came back from the room, the decision was taken unanimously.
At the 1959 conclave of the Hands of the Cause, Mr. Khadem was assigned to the United States to act as a hand of the cause for the Western Hemisphere. In August of 1960, Mr. and Mrs. Khadem and their 2 younger children moved to the United States to join their 3 older children who were studying there, 2 of whom were already married. Their years in the United States were perhaps their best. They saw their children and grandchildren grow up there, family members often flocking to their home from near and far. Mr. Khadem never forgot that but for the blessings of his beloved guardian, he could never have hoped to come to the West and to witness the glories and victories of the cause.
I had a burning desire to come to this part of the world and see your shining faces. This was my dream. And the beloved Shawq Effendi fulfilled it.
In his talks, he repeatedly thanked his guardian for having been so kind to him. As he often said in Persian, "Ma koja, inja koja," meaning, how could someone like me get to be here? He never forgot his roots, from the Hayat-e Bagh district in turn-of-the-century Tehran to a place he had adopted as his home. And he never ceased extolling the qualities of the Guardian.
How could I thank Baha'u'llah for all these bounties? And once I remembered my father, who is now in the Afghan kingdom. I was indebted to him. And I rather mention his name to the beloved Shawqi Effendi. But I opened this with my wife that night. I said that I'm going to mention the name of my father. And she said, well, if you're going to mention the name of your father, mention my name too. Well, I told her that she could say whatever she wished to say to the Guardian. But she said, no, I want you to say. And it happened that the following day, when I walked with the beloved Shawqi Effendi around the house of the Master, and he was very happy. Many times I tried to tell him, I couldn't, walking with him. He paused and he turned to me. He said, be sure I'll go to the shrine of Baha'u'llah and will pray for your father, that he be elevated in the Afghan kingdom. Then he walked and turned to me and said, I'll also pray for your wife, that she be successful in teaching. And that was her heart's desire.
Indeed, Mrs. Khadem was to become very successful in teaching in the United States. Her weekly firesides were to become famous. She maintained these lively events when residing in Evanston and later in Skokie, Illinois, both during the lifetime of Mr. Khadem and thereafter. People from surrounding areas came for an evening of learning and discussion, followed by refreshments and socializing. Energetically, she directed these uplifting events, even when in her late 80s.
جمعی به تو مشغول و تو غایب ز میانه. Multitudes are occupied in thy praise, whilst thou art hidden from them. As individuals in this multitude are occupied with the praise of the beloved Shawqi Effendi. ببینید, that means look and see, behold the bounties of Baha'u'llah. Once in a while he said, ببینید, what has happened? The guardian of this glorious manifestation.
The memoirs of his pilgrimages are reflected in moving detail in a book he wrote in Persian entitled In Memory of the Beloved. His love for the Western Baha'i community was immense. He recalled the reference about the glorious future of the cause in the West.
Ere long, these are the words of Abdul Baha. Ere long you will with your own eyes witness how brilliantly every one of you, I don't know whether, oh Baha'u'llah, am I included in it after so many years being with you? If you accept me.
The election of the Universal House of Justice was an event that he and other hands of the cause observed and conducted in the Holy Land. In 1963, they and thousands of Baha'is attending the First World Congress in London joyously welcomed the 9 members of the Universal House of Justice at the Royal Albert Hall. Now that the Chief Steward's mission was complete and the Supreme Body was in place, he, like other hands of the cause, dedicated all his energies in serving this body. He travelled extensively on behalf of the Universal House of Justice, representing them in newly formed national conventions. He responded to their requests instantly and fully, just as he had for his beloved guardian when a younger man. The House of Justice assigned to him in 1972 a monumental project involving a complete registry of all holy places in the Baha'i world. He took this on with a gusto reminiscent of the days when he served the Guardian. He rented an office in Evanston, Illinois, to which he went daily to complete this work with the support of dedicated Baha'i secretaries, principally Florence Avis and Lois Goebel, for some 5 years, culminating in 134 volumes which he personally collated and presented to the Universal House of Justice. The Universal House of Justice was well pleased and conveyed the following message in 1977. On behalf of Baha'i historians of the future, as well as the entire Baha'i community, deepest gratitude for the meticulous research and thorough investigation you have made of historic sites hallowed by the sacred associations of the past. In 1973, he had the occasion to have an interview with his dearly loved co-worker, Hand of the Cause, Mr. Abul Qasim Faizi.
I remember that the beloved Shoghi Effendi very often spoke about the tablet of Karmel. Sometimes every day he spoke about it. He said, let the friends pray for the prophecies of that tablet to be fulfilled. And he said from memory some parts of it. He bade me to memorize it and make a trip to Shiraz and Yazd and chant it for the Afghans, the relatives of the Bab. I'm sure that he's watching us from on high, and all the prophecies of that wonderful tablet, which is the framework and of the administrative world order and the spiritual world center, that how earnestly we wish that he was with us and we could hear him chant that 2 verses, the Queen of Carmel. Ya malakat Carmel alayke min at-tahiyyat atyabuha wa azkaha wa min as-salawat ajmaluha wa abhaha. Salutations from the beloved Shoghi Effendi to the Queen of Carmel.
At the 1984 National Convention of the Baha'is of the United States, Mr. Khadem electrified the audience with his appeal to petition the Universal House of Justice, requesting that the law of Zikrullah be applied to the Baha'is of America. He compared this to the historic scrolls that were sent to Abdu'l-Baha in 1906, requesting permission to build the Mother Temple of the West in America. He invited them to initiate a similar gesture for the blessing of paying Zikrullah.
Now, friends, I don't want to take your time. If it be accepted, perhaps you follow your forefathers or those who put their names and sent to Abdu'l-Baha, and now here to tell the Universal House of Justice with great humility, submission, to give us this law, the law of Zikrullah, from now on. And
as a symbolic act and a blessing, he withdrew some money from the billfold of Abdu'l-Baha, given to him by the beloved Guardian, and offered it in the name of the participants. In a moving expression of unity, the friends gathered at the convention signed a scroll, which was sent to the Universal House of Justice. In their Rizwan message of 1991, the Universal House of Justice announced to the Baha'i world that, as of Rizwan 1992, the beginning of the Holy Year, the law was to be universally applied. Like so many other Baha'is, Mr. Khadem was alarmed by the persecution of Baha'is in Iran and agonized as he heard about the series of martyrdoms taking place after the revolution in 1979. He was at the forefront of meetings held in America in solidarity with his persecuted brothers and sisters, often remarking that he wished he were there with them. He read the poetry of martyred Baha'is who gave their lives willingly and joyfully instead of recanting their faith. He was also proud of the efforts taken by many governments in defending the Baha'is, including the leadership of the governments of the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. He carried with him the protestations of Lords Wotton and McNair of the British House of Lords, and was to meet them on a visit to London, where he personally thanked them for their spirited defense of the Baha'is. Mr. Khadem had many admirers the world over, but it was in his adopted country of the United States, in later years, where the numbers were the greatest. Here he spent much of his time at summer schools and institutes, on missions for the US National Assembly, and in meetings with the Baha'i Friends.
Baha'u'llah blessed him and he said, "Be happy. Today is your turn to go to the field of martyrdom." Baha'u'llah said he's told him some words of encouragement and gave him his own shoes. He didn't have shoes. He wore that shoes and went going to the field of martyrdom. Abdul Baha said the moment he was going and Baha'u'llah was embracing him, he started to dance. And then Abdul Baha himself started to dance. When he said that story, he said, "That is the right place to dance." So we enjoy dancing, and it has significance, material and spiritual. I could see on everybody's face with our beloved native believers last night that each one of you is going to offer all your life, energy and resources. But these days, we are not expected to give our lives. We must be living martyrs. One of the Baha'is of Iran, a bride was swimming, and while swimming, she was almost drowned. And she wanted to pray and ask Baha'u'llah, the remover of difficulty, but she could not remember it. She didn't know. She raised her hand and said, "Oh, Baha'u'llah, 19 times the prayer that my mother-in-law says." Now, friends, 19 times, 100 times, the names, the institutions, and every individual, Eskimos, Indians, Cherokees, whatever, that I met many of them, that our beloved Master of Ceremony said. But I convey it through him, because he is a special. Come here. Did you know that we have
He also had travelled frequently abroad and stirred the Friends into action. Panama in 1972. The Panama Conference produced an outpouring of love for Baha'u'llah, as participants gathered on stage to dedicate their lives to the service of humanity and to their faith. Hand of the Cause Mr. Khadem expressed his gratitude by going down the line and embracing each and every individual. His trip to the Caribbean Conference in Jamaica as a representative of the Universal House of Justice was particularly memorable.
The story of that night is never forgotten. Dizzy Gillespie was there in that conference. I talk, you play music. And then there was a sack of flowers. White rose, black rose. And then I never said black rose at that time. And said, you are giving to the Baha'is black rose and white rose, black rose and white rose. So they see that how appreciated in faith every color. That's the story of that night, never forget.
In the Arabian countries of the Persian Gulf, he was received by the Friends as one of their own. Mr. Khadem's close connection from his early youth to that region and his involvement in the lives of the many devoted pioneers who emigrated there years before without much means created a special bond of love, which is remembered to this day. He was happiest when visiting these devoted pioneers, rejoicing at their spirit of devotion and service, which was now matched by material attainment as well. In 1986, Hand of the Cause of God Zikrullah Khadem fell ill, never to recover. Like so many times before, when he felt he had experienced in dreams what was to come to pass, he dreamt another symbolic dream. In his dream, the guardian asked him to arrange for the pilgrims to come as he had once been instructed to do on pilgrimage. He looked around and found no one. Since there was no one, he asked permission to come himself. The guardian granted his request. When he woke up, he recounted the dream and interpreted it to be his own passing. Before leaving this world, he wrote letters of gratitude to the Universal House of Justice, the National Spiritual Assemblies of the United States, and that of Canada. In his message to the National Assembly of the United States, he thanked them from the bottom of his heart for their kindnesses over 26 years, saying, "I am deeply indebted to our beloved guardian for having sent me to the West to witness the glorious victories of our beloved faith. As I look back over the years, I can only humbly supplicate, increase my astonishment at thee. Please be assured of my deepest gratitude and love for each one of you and for the entire American Baha'i community. May he continue to guide you to fulfill the glorious destiny of this wonderful community as foreseen by the beloved Master. May he protect you and surround you with his bounties and blessings."
In the heaven of understanding, the breeze that stirreth at the break of day, the soft flowing waters upon which must depend the very life of all men.
And now مجلس تمام گشت و به آخر رسید عمر ما همچنان در اول وصل تو مانده. That means the meeting is adjourned and this is the end of my life, but we are still in the beginning of thy praise. O beloved Shawi Effendi.
Would you give your life to Baha'u'llah? Would you give your life to Baha'u'llah? Would you give your earthly possessions, your worldly desires, give your life to Baha'u'llah? Yes, I'd give my